everyone. I am absolutely delighted to be spending time with someone I'm very proud to call my friend, Heather Ensworth. She is a brilliant clinical psychologist, shaman, healer, astrologer, PhD, and she is one of the kindest and most generous people I know. And she's been exceptionally kind to me personally. So I want to say that publicly because you really have. So thank you for that. And Heather and I are going to be discussing principally the lunar eclipse that's coming up on May the 5th. We've both done separate videos on that individually, but there's so much more I think that we can talk about this, because this is a deep, deep eclipse that is just not only affecting us so much individually, but also, I think, profoundly collectively. I think this is a really big shift of energy that we're in. So welcome, Heather. And where would you like to begin with this? There's so much material here.
Well, thank you, Pam. And it's such an honor and privilege to be back in conversation with you. I just so deeply respect you and appreciate you and your gifts and your friendship. So thank you. And yes, I think this eclipse is incredibly powerful, and particularly coming after that total solar eclipse, with Pluto not only continuing to square the lunar nodes, but Pluto squaring the sun and moon at 29 degrees of Aries. So I feel like this lunar eclipse is continuing that deep transformational process that the solar eclipse was setting off. And so many people that I've been in contact with talk about the intensity of what they're experiencing with the energy of these eclipses and the accelerated experiences of healing and transformation that are happening. Because I do believe that both of these eclipses are activating, and particularly the lunar eclipse with, the moon in Scorpio and the lunar node still in Scorpio and Taurus, activating what's been in the shadows that's needing to emerge into the light of consciousness. So it's bringing up a lot for people individually, as well as, I think, particularly with Uranus conjunct the sun opposite the moon at this eclipse time, bringing forward more of what's true, cutting through the illusions, giving us more clarity.
Absolutely. I scarcely know anyone who isn't going through an intense time right now. It really seems to be huge. And it's a very deep intensity that is often connected back to childhood issues, because often with Scorpio, it's something sort of deeply, deeply buried, isn't it? That you've repressed for a long time, maybe not even recognized for a long time. And it's quite interesting. If we look back to that lunar eclipse, total lunar eclipse we had on the 8th of November last year, that was at 16 degrees of Taurus. So virtually exactly opposite this lunar eclipse. And because it was in Taurus, as we know, likes to keep it simple, keep it practical. What can we do that's easy, that we can get on with right away? It doesn't like to dig deep necessarily. So if we think back to that period of time, round about October, November, personally, what was unfolding for you, because obviously these eclipses are opposite each other in opposite pairs of houses. What was unfolding for you then that appeared to be a simple practical solution to fix something, but that is coming up again now and asking that you dig way deeper. And Scorpio is very complex emotion, isn't it? It's not, Taurus is simple, Scorpio is very complex. And therefore, I think that really brings up the intensity. But what you say is so right, Heather, about the shadows, Scorpio, the secrets, the darkness, the shadows. Don't look here. It's, moon in Scorpio, issues of trust and betrayal, I think of very much in that south node in Scorpio too. But then we've got Uranus, which I always think of as the piercing sword of clarity, piercing light, awakening. This is the truth. It's shattering. It's shocking, but we've got to see it now. We've absolutely got to see it. And it's that sort of polarity that's happening right now that I think is creating this accelerated jump. So many people are talking about these jumps in the frequency of light coming in, and that's another part of the intensity. Can we keep up with those physically? But it's darkness and light in such a clear way in the archetypes, isn't it?
Oh, that's so beautifully said, Pam. And I think that as you were describing, it is such an accelerated time, and we are being called into this evolutionary shift, into new paradigms and into a whole new state of consciousness that these cosmic rays and solar energies are guiding us into. But in order to make that shift, I truly believe that we have to heal the trauma of the past that can block us and keep us mired in out of balance patterns, individually and collectively. So the moon in Scorpio and the south node in Scorpio, opposite Uranus, is giving us that clarity to bring to the surface what may have been repressed or suppressed, or we may have been able to cope with those things and keep them at bay, but now it's right in our faces. And I think that can be very painful and challenging. But as we can realize this is supporting us in this rapid, accelerated process of healing to move into higher consciousness, it can help us hold through that process. And I think it is absolutely profound that at the time of this lunar eclipse, Chariklo will be squaring the sun and moon and bringing that healing energy and compassion. Chariklo is that energy of holding us as we're in the process of moving through what may be painful for us to be in a healing experience. So how beautiful is that we're really being held in that loving presence and compassion as we're moving through facing these things that are not only what's been hidden in the shadows from our past, but so many people I talk to are clearing karma, clearing past life trauma. It's like we're letting go of all of the layers of what would hold us back from this profound shift.
Yeah, and the Chariklo energy is such a beautiful archetype of just silently holding that sacred space to allow us to heal. I think it's something that you really embody, actually, Heather. I think you really do that beautifully. But isn't it interesting that Pluto is currently at 0 of Aquarius at this lunar eclipse? So that speaks to me again of truth, because it's ruled by Uranus. Wherever Pluto is transiting, whichever sign, I think of it as Pluto's purpose is to unveil any shadow side, any corruption, any underneath stuff. And Aquarius is very much to do with science and technology and medicine. And Scorpio is also linked to medicine. I think of it as the diagnostic side of medicine and the kind of piercing side of medicine. Anything which is invasive, I think of as the sting in the scorpion's tail. It's got that pointy end, and so it goes deep for diagnosis, but it also has this, the invasive side of medicine, as opposed to Virgo, which has a more getting the body running like clockwork side to medicine. So I think Pluto's role, it's only obviously very briefly in Aquarius, but it is going to give us a glimpse of what it may be starting to uncover in areas of science, technology, medicine that feeds into this whole picture about trust and betrayal and long-held secrets and all of that side of things. So, and isn't it interesting as well that Pluto, particularly around the 1st of May when it goes stationary retrograde, but it's right on the degree where we have the great conjunction, Saturn and Jupiter, on the 21st of December 2020, which set up this whole synodic cycle, this whole new zeitgeist for the collective in air, in Aquarius: truth, revolution, freedom. And Pluto is going to catalyze that around that 0 degree point. And I think it's going to cross, is it another 5 times as it retrogrades and goes direct to retrograde? It's about another 5 times. So it's really going to catalyze and accelerate and it's always collective energy, isn't it, Pluto, in its expression as well, mass movements, that kind of, but it's going to accelerate and bring to the fore whatever that Jupiter-Saturn great conjunction was about at the end of 2020, which I think is much more about freedom, rebellion, innovation, individuality, community. I don't know how you...
Beautifully said, because I do believe that this movement of Pluto back and forth between the final degrees of Capricorn and Aquarius is this final phase of the need for us to deconstruct and to allow these systems and structures that are in the old power over paradigm and the out of balance patriarchal paradigms to be destroyed, to be deconstructed in order to support us in moving into these paradigms of the Aquarian age that are about collaboration in community, that are about power with and for each other, not power over dynamics. So I think Pluto's movement back and forth is reminding us that we need to continue to let go, to let die those old paradigms, but giving us a glimpse, allowing us to begin to envision what we're moving into. And for me, some of the Taurus energy with the North Node in Taurus and Jupiter moving into Taurus in mid-May is helping us begin to dream the new possibilities into being that we can manifest.
Absolutely. It's like a shift away from external authority references. We've always referenced external authority, be it, government, police, teachers, we've outed it, as it were. We've externalized it. But now we're moving into an age where we're rediscovering that sense of center. And I think the North Node moving into Aries in mid-July will really help us come back to self-reliance, self-sufficiency, courage, bravery, your center of power being in yourself, not out there. This is your authority. So that's really interesting. And Jupiter moving into Taurus can be beautiful in terms of bringing us back to the simple, bringing us back to the earth, bringing us back to the fundamentals of growing food and the natural rhythms of nature, and the things that are so absolutely foundational in our lives, having food and shelter. And there's something quite stabilizing about that, which will be good in these fast-moving times. And it will be interesting to see what happens financially, because on the one hand, Uranus in Taurus is suggesting a lot of volatility and turbulence, which is highlighted at this lunar eclipse. But on the other hand, once Jupiter moves into Taurus, I think 16th of May, isn't it? That can bring some kind of stabilization into it. I don't know how you feel about that, Heather.
That's so well said. And I do believe, as you're saying, that it's guiding us to look at what we value, what we want to manifest. And I do believe this strong energy in Taurus is about the importance for us of coming back into a right relationship with the natural environment.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I think that Jupiter is supporting us in opening to those possibilities. I think it's also beautiful at the time of the lunar eclipse that Vesta is conjunct the sun, really supporting us and looking at what is sacred to us. What is it that we really value? What is it that we want to manifest on the earth plane? And I also think, tied in with that, one of the things I've been doing more and more in looking at the energies of these events is also looking at the visual astrology and where are the sun and moon in the sky at the time of these eclipses or these events. And at the time of this lunar eclipse, the moon in the sky will be right at the fulcrum of the stars of Libra.
Oh, wow.
Which to me is such a profound message to us of how are you in balance or how are you out of balance? And for us collectively, the stars of Libra really trace back to that ancient Egyptian understanding of Ma'at, being in right harmony, right relationship with the earth, with the water, with the sky, with each other, with all of life. So I feel like this lunar eclipse is really supporting us in seeing where we're in balance, where we're out of balance. What deep inner work do we need to do to clear that, to come back into alignment, to come back into the truth of who we are, but also how we're in harmony with each other and in harmony with the earth herself.
Beautiful. And, what reinforces that, which I'm sure you'll be aware of, Heather, is that square between Pluto and Homer right at the end of Libra.
Yes.
Homer, and I don't know if it was you and I speaking or when I was speaking to Kelly Hunter, but an aspect of Homer's myth that I wasn't aware of before was apparently, as part of the myth, Homer's partner was taking wild bananas on the island to bring back for his family and the community, etc. And he was arrested and threatened to be put to death by the authoritarian leader, because the authoritarian leader said it was only the elite people that should have first choice of the food, not the ordinary common indigenous people. And although Homer had no military, obviously she just had her community and she'd call on her spiritual help, they overcame the authoritarian leaders and turned the island back to what is called Pono, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Pono, which is right relationship with nature, balance, harmony, cooperation with each other. So that transformative square between Pluto and Homer is such a big part of that. And indeed, and I know you talked about fixed grand square, I think, in your lunar eclipse video, including that involved Chariklo. We've got another one here because Pluto at 0 of Aquarius is square to Homer at 29 of Libra. It'd be easier to see if she was just 0 of Leo, but nevertheless, we can kind of push her in.
Yes.
And Pluto is also opposing a dwarf planet called Varuna, as well, and of course they're square the nodes as well. They're picking up that nodal square. Massive choice points. So Varuna, which I've only discovered recently, 281-year orbit, is the god sovereign, the ruler of the sky realm, and the upholder of cosmic and moral law, the guardian of supreme law. So here we're back to this idea of right relationship with nature, with the cosmos, etc. And so this, where you have all this intensity of the eclipse and Scorpio and, these fixed squares and grand crosses, it's kind of, people are being squeezed to a whole different level of seeing, I think, in their life. Because, often people with fixed crosses, fixed squares are enormously determined, but there's kind of no give in it. There's no mutability. There's no shift. And that can give them great tenacity, but they just squeeze this kind of, and so you have to make a transformative jump to get beyond that configuration. Am I making sense?
Totally making sense, because I do believe that the fixed square the fixed signs, when you have that kind of grand square, it's so challenging, it's so intense. And if you come to center and work those energies consciously, it's one of the most powerful configurations. But I think you said it so perfectly. It's not an incremental change that you're going through when you're in that kind of powerful energetic. It's an evolutionary leap. And absolutely. I think it is so powerful, these other configurations that you're describing that are showing us what we're meant to move towards, what we're being guided into. But it's a huge paradigm shift, an evolutionary leap. And with Pluto squaring the nodes, and then in July, when the lunar nodes move into Aries and Libra, and Pluto's back in Capricorn, it'll continue to be squaring the lunar nodes through December. But we're really being challenged to be at a critical choice point, individually and collectively.
Huge.
And if we open to it, then these energies are supporting us in this accelerated time of transformation. And I think, as you're saying, a critical principle in this is we have to let go of the certainty of the past, the power over paradigms, our understanding with our left-brained ways of knowing and trying to be in control. I think Uranus in Taurus is cutting through those illusions and shattering that sense of human separation from the life around us and arrogance. And I believe one of the other meanings of Uranus in Taurus is saying, come back to natural law.
Yeah.
Come back to that clarity that we have with Pluto and Aquarius, that we're energy beings, that we are interconnected with all of the life around us, but we're meant to come back into right relationship and right harmony with all of the life around us. So it is such a critical choice point, and the Earth herself is going through so much transition and transformation. So we're needing to be in that process with her and remembering really who we truly are as part of the interconnectedness of all of the life around us.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said. It's so interesting, isn't it? Such a counterpoint that with the fixed energies, they are connected to control and attachment to what has been. And that can be with Scorpio, an emotional attachment to a certain pattern of behavior, pattern of emotions. And yet you've got Uranus, which is just going to blast all of that apart. Because also it's interesting that Uranus is at 18 degrees at this lunar eclipse, I believe. Yeah, 18 degrees. It doesn't come back to that degree. It speeds up. It just keeps going and going and going. It never comes back to 18 degrees of Taurus for another 80 whatever years, 84-year orbit. So, it's like now or never. There's a feeling of a huge surge forward with that Uranus not coming back to that same degree. The other planets retrograde to some degree over the summer, but not Uranus. So it's like whatever is let go at this lunar eclipse, whatever is purged from your being or purged from society, then we're on a fast track with Uranus, because Uranus is always about speed, isn't it?
Well, and I think that's so powerful what you're saying in terms of we can't stay where we are. That I do believe this is such a critical choice point, and I believe what we're seeing in the collective is so many people who are awakening and healing and moving into this more expansive consciousness, and those who are resisting the change are moving in a more regressive direction. And particularly here in the States, we're seeing so much violence, reactivity, polarization, acting out. Because if you're not dealing with what's in the shadow and what you're being called to face to be in this transformational time, then you're going to get caught in reactivity or the trauma from the past and act out. So I think we're really seeing this threshold, crossroads of what decision are we each making? What responsibility are we taking for which path that we're on? And it is, I think, just an accelerated time of change.
Absolutely. And what you're describing, Heather, is really, to me, that Mars in Cancer, which is still just out of bounds up until the day of the lunar eclipse, square to Chiron in Aries. So, and therefore Mars is ruling that Chiron, ruling Aries. So there's such a sense of I need to protect self. I'm vulnerable. I'm wounded. And so I'm going to kick off. It's impulsivity, overreactivity, as you say. But those are all the lesser sides of that side, because ultimately I see Chiron in Aries as finding your own leadership, finding your own hero inside yourself. But yes, it can very much express with all of these pressures and intensity in a less positive way, which clearly it's.
But what you're saying so beautifully, and I think is really a critical insight, is that these energies, particularly the squares, can manifest in a shadow way. the lower level of conscious expression of that, or in a very profound, more conscious way.
Yeah.
Because I see Chiron and Aries squaring Mars and Cancer as the potential for healing Chiron, our sense of self, or healing the out of balanced paradigms of the age of Aries that we're still caught in collectively with the patriarchal power over dynamics. And then Mars and Cancer is the opportunity to act and express our energies in ways that are compassionate and caring and sensitive to those around us. So again, we're at this choice point where we can either work with these energies with their deeper archetypal meaning and what they're calling us into, or we can resist them and then get caught in the shadow side of that. Because the other square that's interesting at the time of this lunar eclipse is Venus in Gemini squaring Neptune in Pisces. Now that can play out in either the shadow aspect or the higher conscious aspect, which would be holding each other in more compassion, being clear in how we're communicating Venus in Gemini with each other. And are we coming from that sense of oneness, Neptune and Pisces, and compassion and love? Or are we getting caught in illusion and delusion and then acting out verbally and in other ways in our relationships? So again, it's such a powerful time where we're able to choose the path that we're on with these energies.
Because it could express, absolutely, Heather, it could express in a shadow way as confusion about the facts, Gemini, confusion about the information, things not being clear in all this intensity, in all the truth that's coming out. Well, is it true? Is it not? So, or that could express beautifully, creatively, couldn't it? Aesthetically, linked to beauty. So beautiful words as well, very good for writing. So there are layers to this sort of coming in. And it was so interesting what you were saying about these transformational leaps. Well, obviously Pluto square the nodal axis pretty much all of this year is such a big part of that. But I happened to come across another dwarf planet I haven't worked with before called Chaos. And Chaos at the time of this lunar eclipse is at 29 degrees of Gemini, so conjunct Venus and on the world axis, 0 of the cardinals. And digging into the myth of Chaos, this is linked to the emptiness or the void or the abyss. It's linked to when heaven was ripped from earth, blocking our oneness, our connection with the divine and with source. And what the process, what the purpose of Chaos is reconnecting us to the divine. And in this case with love, because it's conjunct Venus. And what is so interesting, I went on a bit of a detective hunt. I don't know if I shared this with you, but Heather, I put out a video about this because there's a chap in America called Jeffrey Hoppe, I think his name is pronounced, Hoppe, and he runs something called the Crimson Circle. And he has channeled Adam Saint-Germain for a long time, for many years. And I only caught on to this recently, but from September last year, Adam Saint-Germain was starting to talk about something called the Heaven's Cross that was happening on the 22nd of March, 2023, very specific. And this Heaven's Cross, Adam Saint-Germain explained, was an opening portal to our greater divinity and our greater multidimensionality as humanity, because our consciousness has raised high enough for us to get to that point. Jim Self is another apparently very well-known American who was using exactly the same term, Heaven's Cross, for exactly the same date, March 22nd. And I know someone in the UK who's a very gifted seer, Amanda Lawrence, and she sent me a voice message talking about this second layer of light coming in on March 22nd. They were all, all saying the same thing from a different point of view, not necessarily knowing each other or the astrology. And she also said, this is an opening to our greater divinity and multidimensionality. And Magenta Pixie also said something that echoed all of that. So isn't it interesting that with slow moving chaos, they're all about 300 years of orbit, aren't they? On the Aries point, on the world axis, helping this process of reconnecting us to the divine, it is really bringing in this huge transformation for humanity of, yes, there's an absolutely apocalyptic crashing of the old, but boy, is there life force and power in birthing the new. And that's really exciting. I know. I went on a bit of a wild detective. I was getting so excited because all these people in different geographies, different modalities didn't know each other. And just when I discovered chaos in the last few days, I'd never heard of chaos. Her archetype sort of reinforces what all those people were saying, not knowing the astrology, any of them.
Well, that is just absolutely exquisite. I love that. And it so echoes this energy of Pluto squaring the lunar nodes, because Pluto is that planet of alchemy, of death, rebirth. Yeah. So chaos is reminding us that in order to do an evolutionary leap, you have to completely let die the patterns of the past and be in a time of chaos. Yeah. Be in a liminal period where it feels like everything is falling apart and you have no clue what you're moving towards, which is that period of metamorphosis, the middle time with Pluto transits, where you let something die and burn away, but then you're in that chrysalis, you're in that transformational time to emerge in a new state. So that is what is so profound about this time, that we are on the cusp of moving into a new age. We're in a new precessional cycle. And I think it's profound that we're, from the perspective of the Yuga cycle, at the end of the Kali Yuga, the end of the period of forgetting who we truly are, the end of the period of being disconnected from source, from our deep relationship with the divine, with cosmic consciousness, to have the potential to move into this golden age. Yeah. That is the potential and promise and hope of all these energies that are supporting us. But again, it's a critical choice point. Do we allow ourselves to be in chaos, to let these patterns of the past die, in order to be in this liminal time that's turbulent and can be confusing and overwhelming at times, but it's guiding us into this radically new earth and new consciousness.
Yeah, totally. And probably the caterpillar's feeling a bit edgy when his chrysalis is starting to crack. I'm not so sure, I want to go back here. But yeah, absolutely. And I think of Pluto, I don't know how you think of it, Heather. I think of it as completely dying down, going down. I think of it as a tree dying in a wood, falling, rotting all the way down, but then to produce new fertile soil for new growth. So it doesn't just half die, it completely dies. It completely rots down before it can start to produce new growth. So there is this period of we're just hanging in between two different consciousnesses that are so different. And there's such an element of trust. And, as I've said in some of my videos, we are being asked to let go from our attachment to the tangible, that we've known the 3D, your bank, your money in your wallet, and the government structures and everything you've relied on in your life that have been foundational, and just trust the invisible. Hitch your star to a wagon. Trust the invisible, trust the energy, just trust the frequency. And that's a big ask for people, many people.
Well, and part of what's tied in with that is, I do believe, and from my background in neuropsychology, we are actually shifting from being left brain dominant, which we've been for the last 5,000 years. Prior to that, we were right brain dominant. But part of the profound meaning of moving into the age of Aquarius is moving into balancing left brain, right brain ways of being. So part of what you're tapping into is that left brain way of thinking is the longing to be in control. It is the idealization of our sense of separation and individuation. It is that sense that we're on a linear trajectory, and moving into more right brain ways of knowing is about remembering our relationship with all that is, our interconnectedness. It's about coming back into empathic attunement. It's that coming back into the understanding that actually everything is about cycles. We're not on some kind of linear path. We're not in control. We can participate in these shifts that we're in with all of the energies and life forms around us. But that right brain way of knowing is about trusting your intuition, trusting these larger energies that are guiding us, and honoring that everything is a cycle. Part of the understanding of Pluto and of chaos is the meaning of the journey into the underworld, into that time of letting go of what's been, of letting something die, to be in that transformational process to emerge in a new way. And that is the process that we're in now. But we have to really come back into that more right brain way of trusting our intuition, trusting our interconnectedness to these energies that are larger than we are, that are actually carrying us through this journey. And then trusting the healing energies like with Cheroklo and Chiron, who are supporting us in how to move through that. But I also love that Eris Xena is so involved in all of this, that there's that ongoing square with Pluto, and Jupiter has been conjunct Eris Xena.
23rd.
And I do believe that part of her message, in that she's 44 degrees off the ecliptic, is saying, dare to be on a completely different path.
Yeah.
Dare to not be trying to fit in with the cultural expectations, the social pressures, the authorities who are telling you who to be, how to be. Listen to your own intuition, honor your own unique creative path, and dare to step off the beaten track and be in your own creative process.
And isn't it interesting, as you, I know, have noticed, Heather, that the North Node is going to retrograde into that conjunction with Eris, which is going to last for quite some months, isn't it? From sort of, sort of June, July, when the node's into September, October?
Yes, I think that is going to be a very powerful time. Because I think as we're trusting chaos, I've got to explore that. That's really wonderful. A Kuiper belt object. But as we're honoring being in this chaos, I do believe that Eris Xena in particular is beginning to show us the new path. And I'm also seeing with so many people these incredible creative visions that they're having, the spark of creativity to move in new directions in all fields, in the arts, in business, in science, because we're opening to these energies that are supporting us in moving in these radically new directions if we trust.
Absolutely. And it's really also supporting the truth tellers, isn't it? Because Eris is very linked to that, as I think you have observed as well, that you have to tell the truth. You know, no more subterfuge, no more Scorpio long buried secrets. You know, this is about truth and clarity moving forwards. And what you were saying earlier, Heather, about, you know, almost living much more in the flow and less in this kind of linearity. I also see that as Saturn in Pisces, that Pisces is dissolving the linearity and the 3D-ness, if you like, of Saturn, because Saturn is, again, the old structures, which have been, it's almost like Pluto, the last few degrees of Capricorn. You know, Pisces is dissolving those traditional old 3D structures, but more and more people are writing to me about slippage in time, slippage in a sense of reality, that they're moving more into kind of dream time, or they lose time, or, you know, they're becoming more visionary. And that to me is another big indicator of this shift from 3D to something much more fluid sense of self. And we talked about this, I think, in a previous conversation about Lemurian energy and flowing with the oneness of all that is.
And love.
I think Saturn in Pisces is a kind of transitional phase until 2026 that's supporting that.
Well, I think that is such a key too, because with Saturn in Pisces, it is showing us that these structures that we've clung to for some sense of certainty or security are all fluid, are all dissolving. And I do think that part of why it is so important that we're dealing with what's been in the shadows, that we're letting Uranus cut through illusion to give us more clarity, that we're being called into this accelerated healing process, is because I think our psychic boundaries are also dissolving. So not only are there these slippages in time and space, but in our own sense of separate self. More and more people that I'm talking to are feeling this increasing telepathic ability or increasing empathic abilities to feel what's going on with others, what's going on in the collective. So if we're not healing and clearing these out of balance and shadow aspects of ourselves, look at what we're going to be bombarded by with each other as we are more and more linked in our consciousness with each other. So I think that's part of the dance that we're in, is that we're not going to be losing our individuality, but we're going to be gaining more of this profound sense of interconnectedness and oneness with each other and with the life forms around us. So we're being prepared, I think, with Saturn and Pisces, with knowing how to begin to let those boundaries dissolve in order to move into this new, more fluid, more psychically open way of being.
Yeah, and it's happening so quickly, isn't it? I think that's the thing. There's a real feeling of speed, especially with Uranus not coming back to 18. It's really moving on a pace, and it's so linked to quantum jumps, isn't it? Because that's not linear. Uranian energy isn't linear. It's kind of quanta, isn't it? It's jumps, and so I think for people who have been very embedded in the old traditional structures, this is going to feel quite destabilizing at times. There's no solid ground that you can rely on. So we're all being called on to really trust that flow, to step into that flow of the river willingly. And for those who are feeling a bit edgy, others of us have to be there to hold their hands and say, it's okay, this is the way we're going now, and it's going to be fine. You are going to fly when you come out of that chrysalis. It's going to be amazing. And you would have, you'll look back and feel so limited and tiny and contracted as a caterpillar. You have no idea what's coming.
That's great. And it so reminds me, and I think we talked about this in a previous video, that Hopi prophecy about be in the river, let the river carry you. Let go of the shore. Don't try to cling to that branch. Allow yourself to be carried by the currents, and then look around, see who else is with you. And I think that's an important piece in this, because it can feel overwhelming. It can feel very disorienting to be in such an accelerated time of transition and transformation. And I think it means the importance of trusting that these larger energies are carrying us in these currents to a new way of being. But it also means, I think, staying connected to the earth, so that we can feel grounded in the midst of how everything is destabilized. But I also think it's so important, and you really do this in your life, that we connect with community, and that we be there for and with each other, to hold sacred space for each other in the midst of this process. I was just last week meeting with my patron group, and they were all talking about how intense the solar eclipse was for them. But to be in sacred circle and to hold each other and hear each other and be with each other in that, in a very compassionate way, is, I think, what can allow us to trust in this process that we're in.
Yeah, beautiful. And the, all the lockdowns kind of boomerang, don't they? Because we now so value human connection. Doesn't matter what your status, your background, you're a human being. And it's that precious human connection, particularly people of like mind are going to give such support, because if you've got an off day or somebody else has got an off day, the whole momentum of the group carries you along. And that's the Aquarian energy, isn't it? Community, collaboration. That is absolutely where we're headed in growing new Earth and growing a new society, where we as the people are going to do it from the grassroots up. We're done with top down. We're absolutely done and dusted. So that beautiful sense of human connection, coming together as equal human beings, whatever we do in our lives, is so, it's more valuable than I think it has ever been.
Absolutely, more valuable. And it's within that context that we can be in that co-creation of developing the new world, because we each have our own unique gifts and what we bring to this process. But to me, part of the power of community and being in sacred circles is that awareness that we each need to be fully in our uniqueness to bring those gifts to the community, to the circle, to then together be greater than the sum of the parts, to be this cauldron of creation and transformation together. That to me is such a powerful part of what it means to be in the Aquarian age.
And it's quite paradoxical, isn't it, Heather, that on the one hand, we're going to have a clearer sense of our individuality, our individual essence, and the gifts we can contribute. But on the other hand, we're doing it in community. And that feels slightly paradoxical, but I think it actually, really works beautifully. And it's interesting, apparently, and you may know this because you're much better in your knowledge with Indigenous peoples, but when an Indigenous person introduces himself, apparently, he doesn't give his name, he gives the name of the tribe first. That the name of the tribe is his identity primarily, and then he may give his individual name. That's very Aquarian.
Well, and what's interesting is so many of the Indigenous people still are bringing to us that more ancient wisdom of being right brain dominant, which is more honoring your interconnectedness, your place in the community, than your individual experience or expression. We've been through this 5,000-year period of the patriarchal period with left brain dominance, where the emphasis has been about who I am as a separate sense of self.
Yeah.
And how do I express my own individuality?
Yeah.
And part of what's profound with moving into the age of Aquarius is not only the rebalancing of the left brain, right brain ways of being, but the sacred masculine, sacred feminine ways of being, so that we are balancing our individual self-expression with our understanding of being in right relationship. That it's no longer one being more dominant than the other, but really bringing them into balance and harmony so that we're in our wholeness and in the fullness of that expression of our uniqueness in the context of community and connection.
And isn't it interesting that so many of the dwarf planets, the Kuiper belt objects, have their roots as indigenous creator gods, Kwawa, Teheran Hayawako, Altjira, there are probably several others. They're all based in kind of indigenous wisdom, which we are going to start to rediscover, and how precious that is, how much depth it has, how nature always has a solution to everything, medically or whatever, with all the herbs and the plants. We are going to plunge back into that really deep shamanic connection, which you understand so well as a shamanic healer. And I think that's going to be magical. Absolutely magical. We just lost it in modern society, in cities and offices, and we've just pillaged nature. All of that, I think, is going to shift really dramatically. And young people, I think, are already onto this in a big way.
Yes. But I think you're right. And it's amazing how some of these Kuiper belt objects like Haumea or Maki Maki are in Libra right now. So again, how are we coming into balance? How are we coming into harmony? And nature herself knows this evolutionary leap. I mean, I love Elizabeth Satoros's work about how in the natural environment, species come to realize that they actually will thrive if they honor their interdependence and interconnectedness with each other. That the whole notion of survival of the fittest and competition, which has been our paradigm, is actually destructive and is an immature level of development in terms of the natural world. So we're being called into our maturity, and we humans are being encouraged to catch up with what the sacred life forms around us already know and come back into that harmony and balance and interconnectedness.
And if you look at trees, apparently they're interconnected all through a forest. Mycelium, mushrooms, they have a whole series of root connections, and they communicate with each other. And you may be familiar with the work of Lynn McTaggart, who I think her last book was called The Power of Eight, and how getting together in a group will magnify the group energy. So if we come together in collaboration rather than coming together in competition, you transform the whole result, because everybody benefits from that in a bigger way than if you're in competition. It isn't I win, you lose. It's we all win if we come together. Yes. and share the vision.
Yes. And I think, and you've been doing this, Pam, it's so interesting that you talked about that critical juncture, March 22nd, which is spring equinox, that you've been gathering with groups at the time of the equinoxes and solstices, and how the Earth's energy lines are activated at that time. And as Rory Duff talks about, when we gather in groups at sacred sites during those times, we're being given incredible guidance and energies from the cosmos and from the earth, supporting us in beginning to envision these changes that we're in and feel supported in them. So I think that the importance of gathering in groups and also honoring these earth energies that are getting activated in a more intense way, and these cosmic energies that are giving us these downloads, bringing us the vision of the new ways of being we're moving into, is really important in this time.
Yeah, it's really wonderful, because you reminded me, just I think yesterday or the day before, there was a photographer who happened to be passing where we have our mass meditations, which is just the ruin of an old church in the countryside. But the energy of the land is very strong, and it's getting stronger because that's where we're meditating. It's a feedback system. And because of all the heightened EMFs and solar flares, etc., the aurora were extraordinary there. But what he photographed, and he absolutely promised no filters on this, were pillars of light going straight up, pillars of light from the church and all around the church, the land all around where we sit. And he was absolutely blown away. And he said, I promise I haven't doctored this in any, photoshopped it. This is literally what I saw. And, he was kind of blowing fuses about it. So, working together with the earth to help us, to help the earth's evolution, it just feels so magical and so exciting. If that can be the pathway we're on, trusting the frequency, trusting the energy, trusting the invisible, and holding hands digitally and globally in doing that.
And as you so often say, Pam, coming from the heart.
Yeah.
Really, what is it, your phrase? I love your phrase, lock on to love.
Lock on to love as your docking station.
Yes. And when we can do that and come from the heart, and again, not from the mind and not from that left brain part of us, but from the heart, then we can feel together the currents that are supporting us in this, and the earth energies. And, it's so moving to hear about those beams of light. And I know there are these light orbs that are all around us that are, I think, energies of higher consciousness that are supporting us. So we are being held and guided. And as we come from the heart and connect with each other, then we can support each other through this time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super. You were absolutely on the edge of a change of an epoch, change of an age, a change of consciousness, and we just have to really go with it. You know, we can't keep on hanging on to scenery that is collapsing all around us and saying it's really okay. Don't notice. It's collapsing.
Or just prop it back up. Pretend it's really not falling apart.
Drawing pins in, you know, it's not going to work anymore. It's in tatters. And that's why I think events are becoming so extreme, because the collapse is accelerated as much as the evolution is accelerated. You know, the two are happening simultaneously. It isn't that one has to collapse before the new Earth begins. They're both happening at the same time. And that's why it can appear so absolutely chaotic and destabilizing. But we've got to make sure we're on the right train as we leave the station.
Well, and the other thing that you've talked about a lot that I think is important is as we can stay in that higher frequency and stay in that trust and higher consciousness, then we're feeling more and more that new Earth that is already evolving and in more and more information. If we fall into fear and get caught in reactivity or those issues that have been in the shadows that we haven't healed and cleared, then we're going to be more and more mired in the turbulence and the turmoil. So we can also be making choices about how we're navigating the chaos and intensity of this transformational time. And I think it's important to remember that we have all chosen to incarnate in this time, to be a part of this profound transition time. So what a privilege to be here, to be participating in and supporting the co-creation of this new world and new Earth.
Absolutely. And so well said, Heather, because it isn't just a same old choice point in a regular lifetime. This is a choice point that is going to matter for the next age that we are a participant in. So let's not make a pig's ear of the biggest evolutionary jump that we've had as humanity. It's a massive cosmic choice point, I see, because we're actually choosing to step back into our galactic citizenry,
yes,
or not, depending on which train we're on when we leave the station. So it isn't just a regular choice point in a normal life. It has a totally different scale to it in the way I think we're both seeing it.
And I think that's part of why Sedna is so important in this too, in that she comes back in, she journeys from the Oort cloud back into being close to our inner solar system as she is now, to bring her message, and her deeper archetypal energy is about the willingness. I mean, at the critical point in the Sedna story is when she lets go of clinging to the boat, thinking that that's giving her safety and security in the storm. She lets go and dives into the depths of the sea and dissolves and becomes one with the sea. And it is that, as you just described, we're not in an incremental process of change. We are completely dissolving from who we've been as humanity into this new energetic way of being and interconnectedness with the oneness and with the energies of the galaxy in a profound new way, if we allow ourselves to be in that metamorphosis.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting, isn't it, that so many of the dwarf planets with that very long orbit of around about 300 years are changing sign. Right? Manway has just changed sign into Aries. Homer's hovering, just about to re-enter Scorpio. You've got Chaos about to enter Cancer at that world axis point.
And Sedna moving into Gemini.
That's quite a number that we know of that are changing sign, and they will stay in those signs then for 25, 30 years. You with Sedna, it's going to be, a great deal of time. So there really is a massive shift in energy as we move forwards. And it's right now, isn't it? It's right now. It's not 10 years down the road. We're in it. We're in this crucible of change right now.
We're in the chrysalis, but
absolutely,
as you said, we're waiting to emerge as the butterfly.
Yeah. Do we fly or do we eke? Yeah.
Perfect.
Wonderful, Heather. It's such a joy to spend time with you. We always have great discussions, I think, and lots of sharing. And, you give me lots of thoughts and ideas that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, it's very rich for me. So thank you.
Well, I love being in these conversations with you, Pam, and I have such deep respect for the work that you're doing in this time. And I am very aware of how many people you're impacting and how many people that you're helping to support through your wisdom, through your guidance, through the ways in which you let these energies of the cosmos come through you to support us in this time. So,
well, that goes for you too, Heather, because you are doing exactly the same with, all your unique gifts and healing abilities and shamanic perspective and seeing the big shifts of ages, which is something that you are extremely expert at. So, thank goodness for you. So thank you for everything you're doing. We've all got a piece of the puzzle in this.
And I'm so grateful to all of those who are listening to these conversations, to all of those who are in our communities, who are also bringing their gifts and doing their part to support this shift. So
yeah, every single person has a piece of the puzzle. Yeah. Every single person, and it's precious.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather. I've loved it. Really, really enjoyed it.
Lots of love to you.
Okay, love to everyone.